meeting is being recorded.
Good morning. I'm here with Donna Boswell. She's a clinician and licensed master social worker with more than 25 years of experience as a therapist, forensic consultant, and family advisor. She has helped hundreds of children and families and young adults through their darkest times of their lives. And she specializes in mental health innovations in healing high conflict divorce and formulating teams for proactive and aggressive interventions in child trauma cases. She has an extensive background in court forensics, case strategy, and consults frequently with judges, attorneys, attorney general's offices, and prosecutors. She currently serves on the National Munchausen Syndrome by Proxy Task Force under the American Professional Society on the Abuse of Children. She and two others have started a nonprofit child impact projects to help with child abuse prevention. So welcome, Donna. We're happy to have you here this morning to talk about how parents can be aware of child abuse and how we can prevent it.
Thanks, Betty. I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Let's start by talk a little bit about the child impact projects, what it is and what impacted you and how you got involved with that and to start an organization like that.
Child impact projects is primarily put in place to raise awareness that children's rights matter. We work to train frontline professionals, which includes CPS, psychologists, law enforcement, judges, prosecutors. We all work together on discussing child trauma cases and better ways to intervene in those cases. We're focused on proactive and aggressive measures in child trauma cases to prevent children from enduring compounding traumas ongoing, try to get in there quicker and get them out. We advocate for children's rights with policymakers and are working to change laws to better protect children. We're currently training right now in Tulsa and Fort Worth, and we're expanding into Nashville this year.
That's great. Well, so this is an organization that really works to change laws. I mean, what do you think, just starting out, what can the community do and what laws need to be changed or modified to help these children?
Some of the more difficult cases are medical child abuse cases. Those perpetrators operate with a great deal of deception and manipulation. And Oklahoma does have good laws, better than some states. However, we're working to affect legislation to better protect children. What those perpetrators consistently do is lie to doctors to subject children to unnecessary procedures. And so if we could adapt our laws to make lying to a doctor a felony, it'd be easier to get in there quicker before children are enduring unnecessary procedures and surgeries.
Can you tell us a little bit more about what medical child abuse is? And that is the Munchausen by proxy. I may have that term incorrect, but tell us a little bit about what that is, because some of us, those perpetrators do want attention. So some of us may see it and maybe not know it.
Right. Those perpetrators, unfortunately, operate with a great deal of deception and manipulation. They subject children to unnecessary procedures, and they often lie or fabricate or create symptoms to get procedures done on children and medical treatment for children that oftentimes isn't needed.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I'm moving on to some different things about child abuse in general. At the last forum that you held with law enforcement officers, judges, I was struck by the fact that they were talking about the rise in child abuse, the use of technology in child abuse, and the age of the children who are being abused. Could you talk a little bit about those three things?
Yes, at the most recent forum, they did discuss that abuse is occurring more frequently in younger children. Unfortunately, younger children are nonverbal and therefore aren't able to report or articulate the abuse. So it makes them more vulnerable to abuse. The law enforcement professionals also discussed the internet as ways for perpetrators to study crimes and access other perpetrators. It's also a way for them to share information, whether it's child pornography or videos. And sometimes perpetrators study crimes through the internet, which makes it very easy to learn how to get a child not to talk or how to conduct their crimes, things like that.
What can parents do? I mean, we talk about the internet or using technology. Do perpetrators use technology to access or groom older children who are actually on computers?
Yes, unfortunately, kids of all ages are on computers, often on gaming devices or playing games online, things like that. Unfortunately, often children are playing games without proper supervision or parameters in place on devices to protect them. They may think they have met a friend online and they have no idea that it's an adult or a perpetrator potentially. So it can be a very dangerous place for children to be.
So what should parents do about that to protect their children? A lot of kids do games online, and uh, what can we do as parents to prevent that kind of thing happening?
Um, there are computer forensic consultants, I think particularly for teens, because as parents, often we can't begin to imagine everything that they can learn and do and find online. So having a good consultant look at your devices, check devices. There are certainly parental controls that parents can put on devices. Kids can often work around those, unfortunately, and that's why I would suggest having someone, a professional, check in periodically and oversight, you know, any activity your kids have online. Also, limiting screen time and things like that is important for kids. And then if you think your child has a problem or is at risk, I would certainly involve a clinical team to help both the child and the parent know how to effectively navigate those issues.
How would you know what kinds of signs could a parent look for? How would you know if a child might be having issues or might be at risk of being groomed by one of these perpetrators?
Significant behavioral changes in kids, depression, sleep disturbance, children who are withdrawing, children who are pushing others away, children who are engaging in self-harm. Just pay attention for significant behavioral changes and things like that. It's not uncommon. I've been in cases where kids are having a hard time in school all of a sudden and really depressed. And then we would find out when we looked at computer forensics, they were staying up all night. And a lot of times the gaming they get into is dark and negative and scary, and that can lead to depression and things like that.
Mhm. Um, Moving away from computers, if a child I have a friend in another state who very involved parents whose son was groomed and abused by a coach. And the child did not tell his parents until they sort of pressed him and he burst out in anger. Why is it first that children hide this kind of thing from parents who are very involved? And what can parents tell children in advance, maybe talk to them, not scare them, but talk to them about how to handle a situation that might occur like that?
Well, why they don't tell, oftentimes they're afraid. Sometimes they've been threatened. Sometimes it's confusing because a majority of the time the abuse is from someone they trust or is close to the family, whether it's a family member, coach, camp counselor, church volunteer. There's a number of people that have access to children. That can be confusing. Depending on the abuse, there can be a lot of shame and guilt for the child. Children are taught to trust adults. They're going to have guilt, shame, and fear. And also, we need to equip our kids, starting at a very young age, to be able to take care of themselves. We as parents can't always do that, but we need to create opportunities to build self-esteem and confidence, and to teach them very early their body parts, good touch, bad touch, what's okay, what's not okay, that it's never okay to keep secrets from your parents or to keep secrets with an adult, things like that.
Yeah, I think that's something important to hear because I think as parents, we often want our children to always be somewhat deferential to adults, respectful of adults, but at the same time, we need to be teaching them that they need to respect themselves and be able to advocate for themselves if something does happen. So there's that line to walk a little bit of, the authority is not necessarily always the authority or the good authority. Yeah.
Well, yes, and they have to trust their own feelings and their own intuitions and set
Mhm.
healthy boundaries, whether it's with friends, adults, whoever, to trust their gut and take care of themselves. And that it's okay to say stop and no, and that's not
Mhm.
okay, and to always tell someone.
Mhm. Yeah, good advice. And that's not a one-time conversation, I guess.
No, ideally that starts very young, as early as the age of 2, and is going on throughout their lives, and you have open communication and allow them to talk to you. And it's hard for a lot of parents because oftentimes we want to just fix things. And when a kid's been through trauma, it's important just to sit and be with them and
Mhm.
create a safe place for them to talk and not try to fix it, but just let them talk and process. And also get the right professionals involved that are trauma informed and trauma certified to help them process anything they've been through.
How do you find a trauma certified professional?
Well, we're lucky in Tulsa. We have a good group of at least 7 clinicians, I believe, rebound mental health, and they're all trauma informed and trauma trained and excellent at caring for kids who've been through any kind of abuse. Um, so it's just working, and you want a really good team, for both the parents and the child. I mean, the parents have as much work to do as a child in order to learn how to sit and engage and help the child process the trauma and respond
Mhm.
appropriately.
Uh-huh. Yeah. So getting a professional who is trained in trauma is really important to help the entire family work through that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. S so typically, we hear about stranger danger, but you've talked about, coaches, youth workers, church workers, whoever, maybe being the perpetrators of abuse. Is it more often a stranger or more often someone you know or both that might be an abuser?
More often than not, it's someone close to the family or someone the child and family trusts, which makes it difficult. I mean, we've got to have our kids. It's so important for their confidence and self-esteem to engage in camps and extracurricular activities. That's all the stuff that gives them challenges in life that helps build that core. But at the same time, they've got to have healthy boundaries and understand their private parts, and that no one touches their private parts, and good touch and bad touch, and then what to do and how to react if that occurs. Because we've got to continue to engage our children in all of those activities that shore them up.
Mhm. Do you find that listening to this, I wonder, do you find that parents sometimes are in denial about abuse happening?
It's hard because unfortunately abuse is generational and gets passed forward. And so, yes, if you are a parent that has had a history of child abuse or significant family history of abuse, it's important that our parents are getting help and getting counseling and working to break that cycle and not continue the patterns of abuse, and pay attention and understand and know how to be there for their kids, protect their kids, but also raise resilient, strong kids that can take care of themselves.
Mhm. At your last forum, I was struck by the law enforcement, the detectives talking about reporting. If someone, if I suspect child abuse, or if someone suspects child abuse, rather than talking about it to a principal or a teacher or whatever, you should immediately report it. Can you talk about that and why that's important?
Yeah, I think sometimes people are reluctant to report because they aren't sure if it's abuse or not. But what everyone needs to understand is we are all mandated reporters if we even suspect abuse. So it's not our job to investigate or determine, but we are required by law to report it. And it's important when you make a report to report it to both the hotline, the child abuse hotline, and to law enforcement. You've got a better shot at really getting it looked at if you go both ways. I think it's also important if you suspect abuse at all to get well-informed and trained clinicians involved immediately, like I said, both for the child and the adults. Oftentimes, if there's a disclosure, kids are taken to forensic interviews. It's not uncommon that they don't disclose during a forensic interview. So I think you've got to keep that clinical team in place for ongoing monitoring and support going forward.
So I did not know that. I didn't know that reporting it to the hotline and to law enforcement were sort of two separate things and two separate steps. Are both of those anonymous?
I know the hotline's anonymous. I don't know how law enforcement handles that because it's a police report. But I think it's important for the best result to protect the child to have both entities involved. Unfortunately, things often are quick to be screened out through the hotline. And also, it's not uncommon that it takes multiple reports to get results to protect a child. So it's all, building a case to protect the child and documenting things ongoing to bolster the ability to protect the child later if necessary.
Yeah, I think you had mentioned that you had reported a child being abused 7 times. So I guess we can't depend on, well, my neighbor will report that and therefore I don't need to. You're saying that everyone who suspects it should report it because
Absolutely.
it's to the child.
I think particularly when you've got any kind of a divorce circumstance, it's easy for the hotline to rule it out as a custody battle and one parent trying to gain custody or gain advantage. So yes, as many people that as can report as possible is beneficial to the child if there is abuse, whether that's school professionals, physicians, concerned citizens, neighbors, psychologists. Everyone's required to report. Everyone needs to report to protect that child.
And then I think it was the law enforcement officers or the detectives at the forum mentioned that discussing it, for example, if I thought a child in my child's classroom were being abused, not to discuss that first with a teacher or not to discuss it with a principal, but to immediately report it because it might interfere with the investigation in some way.
Yeah, they don't necessarily want lay people investigating or interrogating the child, I think was their point. It's better to get the right professionals, get a good forensic on the child and people that know how to handle those situations properly and not re-traumatize the child by taking them back through the abuse and things like that unnecessarily. But to let the professionals that are trained take over and handle it.
Mm-hmm. And to not dilute a possible case or potential case.
Right.
Yeah, I found that to be really eye-opening because I think it's human nature to go talk to your friend. Well, do you think this child's being abused? Or go talk to the teacher and let them handle it. But it really is up to each one of us. By law, we're required to report. So I think that was an important message, at least for me, to hear.
Yeah.
So, and another thing that struck me was how difficult it can be to get a child abuser convicted. I think the DA mentioned that it's easier to convict a animal abuser than someone who's abusing a child. Why is that?
There's a number of things that go into why it's difficult to prosecute child crimes. First of all, there's gaze aversion. It's really difficult for people to even imagine that a parent or someone would deliberately hurt or harm a child. It's difficult to look at, it's difficult to talk about or think about. So people just oftentimes turn their head and don't want to think about it. Oftentimes abusers are good at not leaving visible injuries on children. So sometimes it's hard to document. There's certain cases that are difficult to prove abuse. Children's bodies heal quickly, particularly in terms of sexual abuse. So there's oftentimes not evidence of the abuse. Children are easy to manipulate and scare into recanting their stories. Children often aren't great witnesses because their memories are often jumbled, and it takes time for them to feel safe. And until they feel safe, you're not going to get a full disclosure or a good disclosure. I've worked with some teenagers recently on a case out of state, and it's hard. The memory recall and feeling safe enough to process the trauma is difficult. And so it takes a long time for them to be able to recall and give a good report. Our system isn't geared very well towards intervening in these cases. DHS is totally overwhelmed with cases and probably often don't have enough time to truly do good, or thorough investigations. I think things get ruled out quickly and not looked at like they need to be. And then our court systems are geared towards 50-50 access by parents. That makes it hard to work these cases and protect kids because children's rights often just kind of seem to fall to the wayside and parents' rights supersede that. And we also get in a bind where if nothing has happened in the domestic court, DHS assumes, okay, well, then the kid wasn't abused. And also the judge may be thinking, well, if DHS didn't intervene, there's not abuse. And it doesn't adequately get looked at, and everybody's confused, and we're not getting all the evidence on the table and a good investigation. So it's a tough circumstance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a lot of moving parts to that. Well, in general, is there some good news on the on the child abuse front? I mean, I was surprised that the detectives said that abuse is going up. Did that have something to do with the pandemic? Seems like there are people like you who are more aware and working for children's rights, and who are professionals who are informed in what to look for. So what is the good news, and what are we doing to improve some of these things?
Well, the good news is in Oklahoma, we have good laws for prosecuting abuse. There was a report card issued nationally, and we got an A in terms of our laws to protect children. So that's super exciting. What's also exciting is that we have the child abuse, system in place to do interdisciplinary teams to investigate these cases. When we did that recent symposium or training with the different law enforcement agencies, it's exciting to me that we've got groups like OSBI and Homeland Security and the FBI that are working together collaboratively often on kids' cases. We've got great prosecutors that care about kids and are trauma informed. We've got good clinicians that are trauma informed. And people are reporting more due to the mandatory reporting laws. So we're continuing to raise awareness and try to work together and train. We're working on getting more training and support for our frontline professionals, which will help bolster all of these processes. And I think it's just critical that we all work together. And that's a lot of what we're doing through Child Impact Projects, is pulling professionals together, having the conversations about what needs to happen, what we need to be doing. One really exciting thing that's come out of the recent, law enforcement training was looking at doing a full week training for frontline investigators. Years ago, Dr. Bob Block did that in Oklahoma or in Tulsa for our law enforcement professionals, and we're looking at bringing that back. So I think things like that will help us continue to be on the cutting edge of aggressive and proactive interventions in these child trauma cases. And I'm excited about the good stuff that's going on in Tulsa for kids on that front.
Yeah, I was, to your credit, I have to brag about your your foundation, what you formed, this coalition that you bringing these people together to speak to lay people like me and to media is so helpful. And what I was so impressed with about the most recent forum was the fact that Homeland Security, detectives, law enforcement, judges, all of these people not only were working together, but seemed so caring and so involved in wanting to help children. And I learned a lot, and that's why I wanted to talk with you a little bit and to let parents know that they can talk to their children to as you to use some of your tips to become more to help their children become more aware of themselves and what they can do, and to take on their own advocacy, because I think that's so important, because we can't be with our children all the time and we can't put them in a bubble. So I think, and there's so many different things coming at them. I think that's so important that you mentioned that. And I think the fact that we need to report if we suspect, that we really, it's our obligation to report if we suspect. And I, you know, I have not been in that situation, but I can't imagine, I was trying to imagine myself doing that. And I think it would be very difficult. And if you need help, even with the idea of reporting, talking to someone like you, or talking to someone who has experience with trauma, as a reporter, I think, as someone who might need to report child abuse, I think is important to know, because I think it would be very difficult.
Right.
So do you have any final words for us, our audience, our parent audience, before you go? And if there's anything about child impact projects that we can be involved with, you might mention that.
Well, I think the most exciting thing is the willingness of the professionals to plug in and engage. And like you said, I was thrilled at our last training that we had the U.S. Marshals, OSBI, Homeland Security. We had criminal judges. The district attorney's office has been very supportive of all of our trainings. And we've had professionals from Oklahoma City. We've had prosecutor from Oklahoma City, Wagner. I mean, we've had people, the tribes have been very supportive, and tons of people have attended St. Francis Hospital. So I'm thrilled that everyone's showing up for the conversation. I think it's going to take every one of us together, working together, locking arms. Like you said, we have Just Concerned Citizens. Carol Bush has attended, Representative Carol Bush. And we've had tremendous support, and I think we'll continue to make progress. And I also love that all these professionals are so open to training, and they want the information. And that's going to bolster everything in Tulsa for our kids, which is great. In terms of parents, talk to your kids, start early, keep communication open. As they get older, find ways to plug in and connect with them. It's hard when they're teenagers and don't want anything to do with you and you're not cool. Work with clinicians that can help you stay engaged with your kids. And to anyone that wants to plug in with child impact projects, reach out. We've got a lot of work to do. We're going to try to do some songwriters events to raise awareness about child trauma. We've got lots of good trainings and things planned, but we certainly need help. And then also, we're here for families. If you need help, have questions, got a difficult circumstance you want consultation on, don't hesitate to reach out. That's what we're here for.
Okay. Donna, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us. I know you're busy, and I know you travel all over the country to help children. So thank you so much for taking the time today.
Thank you for covering this important subject in children's rights. I appreciate it, Betty.
All right. Bye-bye.